Way back in the dark ages at university, I learnt lots of things. I did engineering and enjoyed it, and I've been a mechanical engineer for the 45 years since. No regrets. But one of the things I wish they'd taught me at university was psychology. How people think and why they think that way. And the reason being that even if I get a specification from a client as to what they want, the thinking behind that specification is just as important. You know, what's a need? What is a want? What are the difference? And how can I address both wants and needs? And what's the driver for this client that I can actually satisfy? I'm Lance from Motive Power. Today we're talking about engineering psychology. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the psychology of dealing with not just clients, people in general. And we're going to use a PowerPoint to do that. Hopefully it comes through okay. So we'll call it Lessons in Management from Private Practice. I'm going to use some real world examples to demonstrate what the world is like. You may think some of them are silly, but that's the way things are. And where I say client, it could be boss, it could be subordinate. So today I'm trying to get you to think. If you're an engineer, these are aspects you need to think about as part of your job. For me, I've always been the design guy. My lecturers used to always remember me as that. I've specialised in special vehicles, but I've turned that into also business design business. I've worked all over the world, literally Tehran to Washington, and some global giants in there from Caterpillar, Sandvik, Qantas, Terex, and a host of smaller businesses. And I only do the complex jobs, primarily because they pay better. Management is not about the technical side. It's about providing solutions to people. And you'll see some examples of people here. There's photos there from the Al-Khatam Desert in the UAE and from Iran and Australia. We don't have railway trains just for the sake of having them. We have them because they provide a service to people. So you are going to need to learn to deal with people if you're a designer or a manager of any sort. You need to be firm when necessary and easy to get on with the rest of the time. You'll see here I got on fairly well with my clients in Iran. In some places you just have to get on well or else. But be aware, you will only be wanted when you are needed. Try and always be positive and don't compromise your successes. This is one of the biggest challenges I've faced. Wants and needs. The challenge, get the client to accept his needs over his wants. If you give him what he says he wants, but it won't do the job, it'll be your fault, not his. Everybody wants a Rolls Royce for the price of a Hyundai, and they can't have it. You can't tell the client, the boss, whoever, that their idea is stupid and it will never work. Tell them that's a really interesting concept, and then explain that as experienced people they have obviously investigated all the pitfalls and have a solution already mapped out. Now let's sit down and document it. So that puts the ball back in their court. No one wants to deal with a negative, condescending, know-it-all engineer. You won't get a job and you won't keep one either. So find a way to keep the client's dream alive and let them own the solution. then be the one to deliver that solution to them. When you get a specification, it might read pretty well, but it might not actually reflect the way things are going to work. And these are examples of what happens when you blindly follow the client's specifications or his desires, his wants rather than needs. I'm pretty sure the designer of most of these vehicles didn't design them to do these sorts of things. I'm sure this category wasn't in the Mercedes design handbook. I don't want to talk about donkeys, but look at this railway line. There's a lot more load there than was ever intended, and I don't know how you would ever get that many apples in a car, let alone get them out. The reality is design specifications rarely work. You have to use your own brain and think about the applications and investigate it. So I have some rules in engineering design, and here's number one. Everybody lies. I may have stolen that line from Dr. House, but it's true. Most people tell the truth as they understand it, but it may not be the whole truth. And sometimes they will outright lie. But the trick with lies is to maintain the lie over a long time, years. You will get caught out. Do not lie. Ask for time to consider the subject. Say, I don't know, but I'll find out. Don't lie. If you've made a mistake, fess up in a positive manner, and it will only improve your credibility. But the bottom line here is trust the client, but verify his data or his ID, because he may not be telling you the entire truth, just the truth as he understands it. We've all heard the saying that experts are has-beens who are drips under pressure. So be aware that in general, experts aren't. They may know more than you in a particular area, but that doesn't make them infallible. It's always important to think about the holistic design, the application, but what's going on around the design. And I'm using the V22 Osprey as an example here. I got asked to design some vehicles to go in it, and it became very obvious very quickly that there'd been some real dumb decisions made in the aircraft design. The internal floor loading, the rating, was greater than the floor loading of the ramp. So if you could magically levitate the load into the aircraft, you could carry it, but you couldn't carry it across the ramp. If you got a vehicle somehow magically into the aircraft, all the tie downs in the floor were so lightly rated that a vehicle within the rating, the weight rating of the aircraft, would take 36 tie downs, which was just crazy. And then of course, if you were landing in a hot landing zone, that meant you had 36 tie downs to undo while you're under fire. Completely impractical, because somebody missed the overall picture. The US military spent well over a decade solving this problem. I know they've made modifications to the aircraft, but I also know that for a long time they were running ATV vehicles that really didn't meet the requirements, because that was all they could find. Oh, and you had to put a chock under the ramp as well. So not only did you have to undo 36 tie downs on a hot landing zone, you had to send someone outside with some chocks to hold the ramp up. This is another design. In a past life, I've designed lots and lots of big conveyors and lots of big pulleys. The theory that everybody in the industry used was based on three papers: And they'd been around for ages. They predated the people that predated me. And they were university theses mostly. So after some effort, I found the papers. One of them was an antique. It was actually written in pencil. But to my horror, it went through all the theory and the calculations, the formulas that all of us that had been using for decades, and concluded that they didn't work. Yet the entire industry had been based upon this one particular thesis. You have to know your data. The basis of this work had not been read or considered in decades. And when we did, there was shock horror. Rule number 3 is people do dumb things. I worked on the installation of the narrow body heavy maintenance docks in this very large hangar for a major airline. And the original contractor had gone bust. My client had been pulled in, and I'd been pulled in with him to try and put it all together and get it working. The fuselage docks, which are mainly what's in this photo here, these big long docks, are all hung up here in the roof, and they move on rails. We started assembling all of this, and there started to be a regular rain of broken bolts coming out of the roof. Now, the structure was designed by one very well-known structural engineering company, and the docks were by another well-known engineering company. It transpired that the roof was undersized. The roof started 45 metres in the air and another 15 metres above that. The site got black banned for 3 months because of the danger. Not only was it the falling bolts, everybody was worried about the falling roof. And there was a lot of welding done into the roof to strengthen it. When you track the problem back, it turned out that the building designers had asked the dock designers what was the weight of the dock structure. And that's the figure they were given. The dock structure, not the assembly. Not the decking, the handrails, the water system, the hydraulic system, all the electrics and so forth that added considerably to the weight. So hence the roof was substantially undersized because the loads it was designed for were wrong. So people do dumb things. Be very careful what you ask for. The management is in the details to make sure the intent is satisfied. And when you're getting data, remember, get the data, trust but verify. So they do dumb things or they don't do the obvious things. This is my first business turnaround job. And it was a tier 1 automotive press panel shop, a very large one, 28 hectares. They were $1 million in the red. But they had $1 million worth of work they'd done that hadn't been invoiced, $1 million that had been invoiced and not chased, and $1 million of orders in hand they hadn't done. So it was fundamentally a simple turnaround job. The accounts receivable lady thought it was her job just to send out the invoices. It was not her job to chase them. The salesman, oh no, it's not their job to chase payments. No, that's not a sales job. Nobody went, there's $1 million out there for the asking. So people don't do the obvious things. You may assume common sense, but common sense doesn't really exist. So people do dumb things, or they don't do the obvious things, or they just do crazy things. Another one of my business turnarounds was a heavy equipment OEM, and they locked the front doors to keep clients out because they didn't want clients to see how dirty the premises were because they hadn't been thoroughly cleaned in 9 years. We cleaned the business, redecorated it, opened the front doors, got out there with clients and increased the turnover or the sales sixfold in 6 weeks. It is possible, but don't rely on people to do the logical thing. Or they just impose their own personal preferences. Back to the automotive press plant. It was a former General Motors facility that was now used to do a range of products for General Motors and Ford and Mercedes, Mitsubishi and so forth. But what it meant was that all the presses were set up primarily for the General Motors dies, and certainly all the employees preferred General Motors. Ford didn't get a look in. Mitsubishi, weeks, months, years behind on some orders. And Mercedes, well, they were somewhere way back there. Because the GM dies fitted easily to the presses, the GM work got the preference. Only when there was no GM work did the other brands get attended to. We stopped that real quickly. We said you can give GM a priority, but no job gets delayed more than 2 weeks. We brought Mitsubishi to the front and cleared their year-old orders. And then we had a discussion with GM where we said, if you don't pay your outstanding invoices, we won't supply you anymore. And that's a big step to threaten a tier 1 manufacturer with their production stoppage. They paid up. But you'll see in business, people have their own preferences, and unless you manage it, those preferences will rule. And in some cases, people just do things differently. One of the things I've learnt in traveling the world is that everybody's the same. There's the good, the bad and the ugly, but everybody wants a few dollars in their pocket and a future for their kids. Working in Iran was interesting. I would ask pleasantly for things to happen and I'd get an affirmative response and they wouldn't happen. The history of Iran is it's been conquered for millennia. It built up, conquered again, flattened, built up, conquered again. The only way they accept advice or instruction is you've got to be right in their face. I had to train myself to put my finger in people's chest and say, don't you do that again, or get out there and do your job. Hard to do when you're trying to be a polite, nice foreigner. Some countries also think that more developed countries are fair game. And I had my share of that in Iran. They thought they could rip me off because I was obviously a wealthy, stupid foreigner. I've also had Chinese express a similar deal. I used to have to help manage incoming, not tour groups, but business groups coming to inspect product. And I was told quite clearly at one point by Chinese that China had been raped by the West for centuries and now it was their turn. So you need to be aware of some of these political things. Motor racing in Iran. We did a big presentation as to how we would develop motor racing. They do have a strong racing fraternity there. They wanted to bring it up. We submitted the proposal and we never heard back from them. They wouldn't answer phone calls, they wouldn't answer emails. So we went out to the racetrack one day and found that they'd done everything that was in the proposal. But they were silly enough not to realise that we didn't put the best bits in the proposal. So culture sometimes comes into play, how people think, what their history is, and how they will affect and impact your work. But the best business story I've ever heard was from the history of Iran. There were 2 brothers. One of them was the king. He was scared his younger brother would kill him off, take over. So he exiled his younger brother. to the harem. And there's a moral in this story that you don't have to kill somebody. If you've got a competitor in business, in life, you can sometimes manage them with kindness. Instead of being killed, the younger brother spent his life in the harem. Then his older brother died, and the younger brother became the king. And they got invaded and flattened because the younger brother knew nothing about being a king and a warrior because he'd spent life in the harem. One of the hardest things I've had to come to grips with as a consultant is Rule 4. Clients are incompetent. I love my clients. They pay me money, they give me great opportunities, and I like dealing with them. But they're incompetent. And I should be happy about that. Because if they weren't incompetent, I wouldn't have a job. Now, incompetent doesn't mean stupid. It just means they don't have the skill set in the areas that I can help them. Rule 5. Psychology is the first part of any project. Before you start designing, you need to work out what people actually want and then arrange to give it to them in a way that they can accept in exchange for what you want. If I'm doing a new product for a client where that's going to be a product for them for a long time, my first question is going to be, what's your marketing strategy? Are you selling a Rolls Royce? Are you selling a Hyundai? You know, how good is it being? What are the sales advantages? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? All those questions, they all feed the design process. You don't do the design and then hope that the market wants it. It works the other way around. So after you've worked out the psychology, then you're talking about commercials. People only consider the commercial terms after they've decided whether or not they want the outcome. Very important to understand that. And that financial aspects come last. Only after they've decided they want what you're supplying and what you're offering do they look at the dollars. Now that's true for clients, bosses and subordinates across the board. It's only after people decide they want something that the price becomes important. The old saying, poor quality is remembered long after the low price is forgotten. Keep that in mind too. As a manager, you will have to make many important decisions. And it's no different as a designer. Over time, they'll probably all be wrong. Every major decision will be wrong over time. In some cases, there is just no right decision. If the big boy here runs away, the missus isn't going to be impressed. If he stays, he's going to get flattened by an elephant. Your aim is the least wrong decision over time. If you're talking about a design decision, always prepare a fallback. Rule number 7, there's usually another way. I worked for this transport company on 2 occasions. One as a designer of the gull-wing trailers, and secondly helping them get profitable. The business was unprofitable because the drivers ran into afternoon peak hour delivering liquor to a major supermarket chain. They ran into afternoon peak because they'd got caught up in morning peak. And the reason they got caught up in morning peak was security would not open the front gates at 4 o'clock in the morning when they were supposed to. I lasted 1 day in this job. I went to the office of the supervisor of the warehouse this company was based out of, and I asked to speak to him. I was told they weren't available. Would I like to leave a message? And I said yes. I'd like his home phone number so I can give it to all our drivers and they can ring him at 4 o'clock in the morning when security doesn't open the gate. I never met the manager. From the next morning on, that gate was opened on time. The transport company was able to operate on time, didn't run into afternoon peak, and was therefore profitable because all of a sudden they didn't have massive overtime costs every day. Frontal assault is not always the best way. There is often a better way of doing things, a softer way, that still comes out with the right outcome. Remember, with any project, you're trying to win the war, not just the battle. And then we get to internal politics. Forget them. Ignore them. If you're not playing a game, you can't lose it. And if you're not playing the game, nobody else can get a handle on you. You just need to be damn good at your job, and the political requirements, the political BS goes away. Rule 9, don't trust suppliers. Remember, experts aren't, and in everything you should trust but verify. You will have control over everything you control, but you won't have control over the things outside of your control, like your suppliers. Get them by the short and curlies right at the start and manage them. Nearly at the end is Rule 10. First, you're going to manage yourself. If you're going to burn the candle at both ends, you'll be useless to everybody. So conduct yourself as you would have others conduct themselves. Stop before you burn out, not after. Remember, the business will just find the next fool. You fall in a heap, the business will say, whoa, what a shame, he was a nice guy. Now, who can we get to take over from him? Set your own goals. Make sure you've got your own sense of achievement from getting to those goals, but manage yourself and look after yourself and have a life. Rule 11, keep this management out of your private life. Don't trust but verify your partner. That is a recipe for marital discomfort if ever there was one. Learn to embrace the unexpected in your own life. Don't try and manage everything in it as you would do in your business life. Now, management. There's two directions. We'll talk about downwards first. Managing your subordinates. Aim for respect, not love. Give your team the reason, the requirement, the budget, the deadline, the resources, and set them loose. They're likely to come back with something better than you expected. And remember, they are there to save you from doing the job, not so you can do it too. This approach will empower your staff, letting them see they can do this work and building their expertise and confidence. Instead of micromanaging them, just check for milestones. And now a contentious one. Managing upwards. No superior likes to think he's being managed. Again, respect, not love. Give your boss or your client the status, the approach you're taking and why, the time frame and the budget, and keep them informed. Don't BS, don't hide from them, don't use tricky words. And remember, as far as the boss is concerned, and also true for a client, you're there to help them. Remember that. You're not the most important person in this chain. They are. So you have to make it easier for them. It's just as important to manage up as it is to manage down. And some final thoughts. Engineering management is always messy because it involves humans. Humans make it frustrating, so take each problem as an opportunity to show you can handle such issues. Even when the sky falls in, stand up straight and be the leader that other people can respect and follow. Learn to enjoy the rich variety of humans with all their foibles, even if they drive you absolutely crazy. Keep a close eye on progress, schedule and costs. If there are problem issues, address them early and don't be frightened about talking about them. You can talk about anything if you're careful with the language. Treat your staff well, thank them, build their confidence. They're the ones that are going to make you look good. And don't ever, ever compromise your integrity. Down that road leads to disaster. Once you've lost that, you will never get it back. So that's engineering psychology. Even if you're doing a technical design, a rocket ship or whatever, you need to think about the psychology of what people want out of this product. Would they rather it was painted red or yellow or pink or violet or whatever? Make those decisions early. Work out how to treat the people that are involved. It will make the whole project a lot harder. And don't ever be concerned to address the issues with whoever is the problem. Follow these, you'll have a slightly more fun life and hopefully a little easier too. Take care.